Hi, everybody, and welcome to Salesforce.org Architect Academy on Trailhead Live, where today we're going to be talking about adopting Marketing Cloud business units. My name is Tom Letty, and I am the Director of Advisory Services on our EDU services team at .org. And we're going to get started. We're going to talk about our forward-looking statement, which is part of pretty much every Salesforce presentation. So if you haven't seen this already, during these types of discussions, we usually talk about things that are maybe on the roadmap, or we might talk about some up-and-coming features that might not be available yet. So one thing we ask you to do is only make purchasing decisions based on the things that are already for sale. And with that, I want to make sure to say thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you for everybody that's been sticking with Architect Academy for the past 2 years, especially with our changing platform, and looking forward to continuing with Trailhead Live as well. A little bit of background about Architect Academy for anybody that's new. We have a mission that we'd like to increase the success of our Salesforce.org customers and partners by increasing the number of architects and expanding the knowledge of architects who serve nonprofits, higher ed, and K-12 schools. And we do this through a variety of different methods. There are our in-person events, which are our Architect Academy roundtables and Ask an Architect webinars. And also we do some one-on-ones and Ask an Expert sessions. Those have all been virtual lately, and hopefully we'll be doing some in-person ones again soon. We also have a bunch of content that's available online, which are our Ask an Architect blog series, some white papers, and we've got a group in the Power of Us Hub as well. And today, I am joined by Dr. Gokul Seshadri, who is one of our Senior Principal Customer Success Architects on our Advisory Services team. He's also a Marketing Cloud expert. And also Rebecca Schultz-Robran, who is a Marketing Cloud consultant for one of our .org partners, which is Accenture. And really looking forward to their presentation. One other note that I want to make is that there is a chat window down below that if you have any questions during the broadcast, feel free to type them in the chat, and we will answer them as quickly as we can. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk about some general features of Marketing Cloud business units and what it looks like to set them up in hierarchical form, what the user experience looks like, and how data can be shared through them. We'll also talk about some things that you're going to want to keep in mind as you're implementing them, such as dedicated IP, setting up a preference center, and how you can have a consistent brand experience throughout, or if you want to even have a different branding experience based on your business units. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca to take it from there.
Hi everyone, this is Rebecca, and we're going to start off with an introduction and go over what exactly are business units within Marketing Cloud. So what is a business unit? Essentially, a business unit in Marketing Cloud is a separate workspace within the organization account. You can have more than one business unit, so business units within the same organization. But what business units allow an organization to do is they allow the organization to manage different users of different departments or teams or divisions. It also provides some protection around data and management across different departments and what data they have access to. It also gives the business unit, the organization, the ability to share common assets and templates across various business units, again, departments or divisions. And it really just helps organize just various business functions across the organization. When talking about business units, we'll be talking today quite a bit around a hierarchy. And when we are talking about it, you'll hear us say and reference child business units and parent business units quite frequently. So what is a parent business unit? A parent business unit is really that top level of the hierarchy. It tends to be the point of integration where the data gets brought into Marketing Cloud. So if you have a Marketing Cloud connector, typically you'll see that connected at the parent business unit level as opposed to the child business unit. And a child business unit sits underneath the parent business unit, so it's a sub-level underneath the parent. and it's typically managed by separate functions or departments or divisions. And child business units can have additional business units underneath it, so the hierarchy can get quite deep if needed per your business unit, per your business needs. You can see on the right just a very general high-level structure. So there's one parent business unit with 3 child business units, all at the same level as each other.
Hi, this is Gokul, and next we will start talking about the features of business unit. What are all the various features supported by business units and how to make the best use of them. In consideration of time, we will just look at the 3 major features of business units in this class. Obviously, there are more that we'll get into down the line. First, let's start off with hierarchy. As Rebecca said, there is this concept of parent and child. But obviously, there is a question of, how many parents can I have? How many children can I have? Is there any limitation? Is there any golden rules around it? Frankly, there is no standardized hierarchical model. It really depends upon the specific business requirements and usage for a given organization or an institution. For example, let's say a nonprofit is adopting business units because it wants to manage different unique brands under a single umbrella. And that's applicable for education institutions as well, higher ed institutions, wherein they have different colleges operating under their unique brand name, whereas there is a overarching university or something like that. So in this case, obviously, each of those individual unique brands should get their own business units under a common parent. Typically, we represent only one business unit at the parent level, and then each of these brands or unique subdivisions branch out as the first level child. It's also possible that your international, or you could have multiple regional chapters within a specific region and specific country, and then you want to evolve region level chapters or something like that, and you want to give isolated and unique experience to each of these regions. So in this case, each of your regions would correspond to one business unit and so on. But we should be very careful about the number of business units, because as we add more business units, we are also adding a lot of management overhead, not technical overhead, but more like a management overhead. And there are costs associated with business units. So there should be a very careful consideration of why you're adopting business units in the first place, whether it's to manage multiple brands or multiple regions, or in case of a university, it could be different segments of population. For example, it's very common to have 3 independent business units for managing the prospects, the students, and the alumni population, because different teams work with these constituents of a university. Then there is also this consideration around data sharing. Please note that parent will actually get access to all data typically, even though you can actually decide to branch out. But in a typical case, parent would get access to all the data, typically from Salesforce, and then distribute it across different child business units. That's a kind of recommended pattern, which we'll talk about in little detail. The last thing here is we want to avoid very complex multi-level, child, grandchild, and great-grandchild, and so on. You don't want too many nested loops or too many levels in this hierarchy. Again, management and data sharing, everything becomes very complex if this business unit hierarchy becomes unmanageable or too detailed or too granular. Please note that the user experience can be unique to each business unit, and that's one of the key reasons why we are even considering this in the first place. For example, the subscriber data that's available to each business unit could be different. In my earlier example, I was talking about a university managing prospects and current students, enrolled students, right? In this case, let's say the first business unit represents the enrollment and admissions. It would get access only to the prospects and applicants, whereas the second business unit can simply have the students as their subscribers. This way, people will only see those constituents whom they are talking about. The marketing users are isolated in terms of what kind of subscribers they are seeing within those business units. That's one big reason for adopting business units. The second advantage is that you can have your own unique email templates and images, common images or themes and things like that, very specific to that unit. This way, again, there is some level of isolation in terms of user experience and what users have access to. Now, it's possible that some of your common assets are applicable across the organization, and those assets can be placed in some kind of shared folder so that all of these units can access. For example, like a common thematic template that represents your nonprofit or something like that, you could actually place it in a shared folder and everyone can access that while still evolving their own business unit specific templates or images. The third aspect is around user roles. It's quite possible that you have independent user roles in each of these units, but we wouldn't recommend evolving too many custom roles because then it becomes a management problem. But if business requirements demand, it's quite possible that each of these business units have their own access control mechanisms via user roles. The sender and delivery profiles, which are a very standard feature of Email Studio in Marketing Cloud, can be different across business units. The reporting could be different. And even the folder structure, which is used to organize data within business units, can be different across each of these business units. But it is always a good practice to consider what is common across them and what is going to be unique in each of these, just for the sake of management and maintenance. Finally, there is this consideration around Salesforce data and how it comes down to Marketing Cloud and how different business units make use of this data. The Marketing Cloud connector is a package that's typically used to sync up data between CRM and Marketing Cloud. In other words, the Marketing Cloud connector synchronizes CRM data, select CRM data, not every single thing, into Marketing Cloud so that the entire marketing infrastructure can make use of it. Okay. So when you set up Marketing Cloud connector package, it would create what's known as synchronized Salesforce data extensions within Marketing Cloud, which are mirror replications of the data that exists in CRM. You can choose what kind of objects you want to synchronize, and you can choose the time interval for this synchronization, and then the whole mechanism will kickstart. Few consideration around this is that it's very good to have parent as the point of integration, even though you have the flexibility to connect Salesforce data directly to some of these children as well. We wouldn't recommend that. We would recommend that the parent gets access to all the CRM data, and then you have the opportunity to dissect that data and provide only data that's required for each of these business units. Okay. There will be some automations that need to be run at the parent level, and you can distribute the data accordingly. An example of this could be, which is represented here, is a university which has got a CRM which holds all of its information. It has its prospect leads, students, alumni, all of this information is held in CRM. And all of those data are coming via the synchronized Salesforce data extensions. And then right at the parent university level, we can be, which has access to all the subscribers, we could run some automations and then deliver appropriate data to recruitment, student affairs, and advancement. This way, there is some level of clarity in terms of what subscriber data each of these business units are seeing This way you have some kind of separation of duties and isolation of reports and so on. With that, I am handing this over back to you, Rebecca, to talk about business unit considerations.
Thank you. So when considering, if you want to use parent business unit, child business unit, what type of hierarchy you're looking for, there are certainly a number of different considerations to take into account when thinking about that structure, what that looks like for your specific organization. So first consideration we have is when we think about a dedicated IP and wrapping domain. So typically, when a Marketing Cloud instance, you have one IP address that can be shared across all business units. With this, it depending on, of course, the send volume and the types of sends that you do, data, this does help maintain a positive sender reputation. If there are certain units that have smaller send quantities, this definitely helps with that. It also helps unify the brand. But of course, additional IPs can be utilized for specific business units if the volume that they are sending is significantly higher, so upwards of 2.5 million per month. So when thinking about different business units, you'll definitely want to take into consideration if you need just the one IP address or if you need additional ones. Similarly, in terms of a wrapping domain, with an SAP, the Sender Authentication Package, typically one wrapping domain is shared across all business units. So this means that that domain wraps all URLs and images within an email that is sent out. Again, this also helps unify a brand. So an example of this would be communications.abcuniversity.edu. That domain would be wrapped around all URLs and images. If needed, individual domains can be utilized for specific business units if required for like sending from addresses. You'll certainly want to take into consideration if you have one brand that can share that domain. Typically, that's what we see most of, and usually that's perfectly fine. But certainly if there are specific brands or subdivisions that need their own branding, you'll want to take that into consideration.
The next would be around opt-out and preference center. Remember that when you send commercial emails, the CAN-SPAM laws mandate that there is an option for the subscriber to opt out of that particular commercial email or to stop receiving any kind of emails from the organization that's sending those emails. So it's a requirement. Now the question is, when you have this kind of hierarchical business unit based marketing cloud implementation, how do you approach this opt-out or preference center? There are two approaches. One is to have business unit level subscriber preference and maintain it at that level. This is especially relevant when you have like multiple brands which are completely isolated from a consumer experience, but actually they form or they are a collective part of a unified entity or a unified organization. All right. In this case, the subscriber John Doe could exist in two business units, and his preferences would be independently managed by each of those business units. The subscription center itself will be different in this case. So in this case, in this example, when this regional chapter with brand 1 is sending out an email, it would then embed a link to its own subscription center. And when the user acts upon that subscription or preference, indicates his preference, it would be recorded at this level. Similar thing would happen at the second business unit and so on. So the John Doe's preference for first business unit is very independent of his or her preference in the second business unit. There are some obvious advantages because when John Doe unsubscribes out of all emails from this organization, he is not affecting the co-brands or the other business units. So that's a huge advantage. But the disadvantage is that we have to build and maintain subscription center at each business unit level, and imagine the corresponding overhead of maintaining the data independently and so on. The alternative is to maintain one subscription center across organization. This is very classic for higher ed institutions like a university, right? A university may see itself as a single brand, even though it has got different colleges and different subdivisions, which are represented in business units. But whatever email they send, they all point back to a single subscription center, and the preferences of those subscriber or the constituent are maintained globally or centrally managed. Okay. In this case, you have the advantage of presenting one brand consistently across, no matter where the email is going to, is coming from. The subscription center is still the same, and you are maintaining the subscription of John Doe centrally in one location. The disadvantage is, in case this guy opts out of all emails, then he cannot receive any email from any of the subdivisions, because the subscriber is seeing all of this as single entity which is sending him emails. So that's the disadvantage. So due consideration should be paid to make sure that the right model that is applicable for your business scenario is adopted for managing user preferences. Over to you, Rebecca.
Awesome. Do you want to go to the next slide, please, Gokul?
Yep.
Perfect. So next, what we are going to talk about is data and asset sharing. So as previously mentioned by Gokul, typically the parent business unit is the point of integration. Again, an example is with the Marketing Cloud connector. Here, you'll certainly want to take into account when considering a hierarchy how you want the data to be shared across the business units and what type of data that may be. Also, who will be managing sharing that data down. Same thing with assets. You have the ability to create and manage assets in various business units and create a structure in which you share that information down. Again, as previously mentioned, as an example on the right of the screen, the university can have and manage and control all subscriber information, all types of information from the CRM, and divvy up and filter various points of data for each child business unit or division or department based on that specific child business unit's needs. So in the example, again, on the right, for recruitment and admissions, the university could create shared folders of data extensions where the data is specific to recruitment and admissions, and that data would not be able to be seen by student affairs or advancement. And again, in the same fashion, the top-level university could create shared folder data extensions for student affairs specifically, so current students, and the other business units would not necessarily be able to see that data. So it really is a way to help protect data that might be specific to individual business units. You can share data and assets from the parent down to the child, and you can also share data and assets between children as well, depending on how it needs to be managed. And again, same thing with assets. If you at the parent business unit want to create templates or provide logos to share down to specific child business units, you have the ability to do that as well. Certainly something to take into consideration is that once a user has access to subscriber data in a business unit, they will be able to see all subscriber data within that business unit. So you won't necessarily be able to hide folders within that business unit of subscriber data. And same thing with content and assets. So this is where a folder structure is really important because it will help organize the data and the assets, but it's important to keep in mind and take into consideration that it doesn't necessarily restrict access to these various parts. So if you have a few different teams operating in one business unit and they're sharing a business unit, that's where it's important to take into consideration that they'll potentially be able to see each other's data. And that's certainly when it comes to developing a hierarchy, it's very important to take into consideration and understand. Back to you, Gokul.
All right, thank you. So the fourth consideration would be around cloud pages. Cloud pages is a very useful feature of Marketing Cloud, and it helps you to build simple web pages such as landing pages for your websites, for your marketing efforts, or microsites. And people often use it to even build custom preference centers um, whose link can be embedded in Marketing Cloud emails. So it's essentially a web experience for your marketing users. Um, Cloud pages have many different advantages. You can actually build each page by constructing individual, unique, rich text blocks or images, or you can combine them and you can share content and so on and so forth. And if you are using cloud pages to build preference centers, it's quite possible that you can use this to build business unit specific custom preference centers. In our example, we talked about two models, enterprise wide versus business unit specific custom preference centers. And this technology is very useful if you want to build a preference center that is very specific to a given brand or a given regional chapter or a given segment. And you can manage to record the opt-ins and opt-outs of your subscribers. And cloud pages via AmpScript also helps you to maintain or link up your data in CRM. For example, if you want to store some of your preferences in CRM rather than Marketing Cloud, cloud pages would allow you to do that via what is known as AMP scripting. In the context of business units, there is a very important limitation that needs to be kept in mind, which is the cloud pages that you construct are accessible only within a BU. In the context of a BU. For example, I can take the URL of a cloud pages and I can use it across multiple business units, but the cloud page itself resides within a given business unit and it operates in the context of that business unit. For example, all the data extensions that is accessible to this cloud pages will be limited to that particular business unit only. The URL or this front-end page can be shared by any number of business units. That is not the problem. But the data, underlying data and underlying constructs are very much tied to a given business unit context. So this should be kept in mind when you are thinking of using cloud pages for any kind of usage, especially when you have adopted the business units or hierarchical model for your own Marketing Cloud implementation. Over to you, Rebecca, for brand representation.
Great. So in terms of brand representation, when considering business units, certainly a hierarchy in utilizing different business units does have the ability for an organization to either unify all brands, divisions, departments under one organization, or it gives the organization the ability to effectively manage and organize the different brands. So first thing to take into consideration is, does the parent business unit need to manage or control the assets of the templates? Should any child business unit not necessarily be given access to create their own email templates or provide their own assets? Does that really need to be managed from a parent business unit across all child business units? If the answer is yes, then the solution for that would be content sharing and giving all of the child business units pre-built templates and assets available for them to use, but not necessarily giving them as much free access to create their own templates or content. The next would be, does each business unit need its own subscription center to manage subscriber preferences? Again, as Gokul had mentioned, if the intent is to give each brand underneath the organization or each division or team the ability to manage their individual subscribers' preferences, then you can certainly utilize an individual subscription center as well as branding for each business unit. If you want that unified front, unified branding, then you can have an enterprise-wide subscription center. And then, of course, are different teams utilizing Marketing Cloud and building it in a similar way, or are they looking to build different constituent experiences for each of the teams or divisions, departments underneath the parent? This is certainly, a big consideration you'll want to take into account because it will, of course, as Gokul had mentioned previously, determine how many business units you're really looking to create and manage. So certainly where there is similarity between business units, whether it's the data is similar or the experience for the constituent is similar, you can utilize shared data extensions to make it easier to manage for that unit. If it is a different experience that the business unit is looking to create for the constituent in terms of the data that they need access to, the assets, the communication flow, then certainly you can have different data segmented off to those units via the shared data extensions.
The next one is about the user roles and how do we manage them. I had mentioned earlier that one of the advantages of business units is that we can have different segments of users at each business unit, and you can also have custom roles defined at the business unit level. Now, how should you distribute the users across these units is a big question. Typically, if you have adopted like a parent and child hierarchy like this, you want to limit the number of users at the parent level. Mostly, it's to system administrators and limited business users who will be communicating with the entirety of population that represents your organization, like all constituents or all subscribers, like a central marketing of a university, centralized marketing department of a university, and so on. Those are the business users you want to put under the parent. Otherwise, it's a good practice to avoid putting a lot of users at the parent level, because once the users are into a given business unit, they pretty much get access to all the subscriber data that's in that business unit. So it's better to limit those users at the top level and instead channelize them to the right business units that they truly belong to. In case of brands, each of the marketing managers or marketing users of that brand can be housed in separate business units and nicely managed at that level. And data and visibility should be controlled within that business unit. Similarly, subscriber preferences, we already talked about that. So depending upon how you manage them, whether centrally or individually, and then users can get access to those preferences and then manage accordingly. And in terms of custom roles, it's good to have a unified custom roles across all these business units, simply because it becomes less of a management overhead. In many cases, it's easy to adopt the out-of-the-box roles, but if you want to evolve custom roles, standardize those custom roles that would be required across these units and then adopt them in a unified manner. And with that, we come to the conclusion of this session. Thank you very much for listening in. We look forward to connecting back with you in future sessions. And with that, I wish to hand over this back to Tom.
Thank you, Gokul, and thanks, Rebecca, also. It's another great topic that I know a lot of our customers and partners have a lot of questions about, and this is really helpful for sure. So I would like to share a few other pieces of information if you're interested in doing a little bit more of a deep dive or doing some follow-up reading. In the Power of Us Hub, we've got a business units knowledge article that you can search for. There's also, if you check out Salesforce Help, there's a business units and marketing cloud page. There's a manage business units trailhead. And then in the Power of Us Hub, there are 3 groups that you can join. There's the SFDO Partner Marketing Cloud Architects group if you're Marketing Cloud architect and one of our partners. There's a Salesforce Marketing Cloud group, which is more general Marketing Cloud information. And then there's also the Architect Academy Roundtables group, where we talk about these topics and many more, and we'll share information about upcoming recordings. We'll also share the link to this recording, and as well as links to any of the associated materials that go along with it. So with that, I want to say thank you to everybody one more time for joining, and look forward to talking to you again next month. And this concludes our presentation.